everybody. Rex Bear, Leak Project. How the heck are you? First off, I just want to say before we get started, I am neutral on the subject of Planet X. I do feel there is enough evidence out there to offer a strong debate there are other planets outside the Kuiper belt. Several articles from multiple sources, including NASA, even states they have discovered well over 1,000 planets, and this is growing almost daily. We even have astronomers from Caltech and other prestigious universities describing Earth changes, solar changes caused by a giant planetary body on the outskirts of our solar system. So certainly that is a possibility. And with that said, I'm neutral and even somewhat skeptical about many claims discussed in regards to Nibiru and the Nemesis. Doesn't mean I don't believe, or I do, and it doesn't matter either way. This information is for the audience to decide and take with you what resonates. You can take that to the bank. I will not disrespect anyone or call someone a liar, and feel most people do have genuine intentions at heart. I also have my opinions and things that I'm passionate about, and ask that anyone that watches this podcast keep the name calling, the insults of others, keep it to yourself, please. Constructive criticism is healthy, it's strong, it's encouraged. However, insults and personal attacks will not be tolerated because they offer nothing of substance or benefit. There are people out there in the world today behind the scenes that are far more deceiving and conniving than most YouTubers, in my opinion. Now, if that said, I do not like to be tricked or fooled, and you shouldn't either. The truth is out there. The Leak Project was created to offer news and awareness not found in the mainstream news. More importantly, to find the truth and bring it to you. If someone comes out with a video or a photograph and they truly feel what they're looking at is genuine, later to find out it's not real, but some other explainable anomaly, that doesn't make them a liar or trickster. I give serious props and have great respect for those willing to put themselves on the line by offering time, commitment to show or search for such evidence. It takes a lot of guts, and I've spent years being ostracized because of my own research that I've done on similar topics. Key is learning from our mistakes, not getting in the nonsense, getting lost in the nonsense. Listen, have an open mind, yet not so open it allows an entire armada of speculation, falsities to blanket the truth. Whether you believe in Planet X Nibiru or not, after this presentation with David, you will have a better understanding of astronomy and our solar system. This is Rex Bear. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Become a contributing member at leakproject.com, and you'll get access to exclusive content only available for contributing members. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Also, I want to make sure you guys know about these really cool, let me show this to you real quick. This is my shameless plug. We've got these new high-quality vinyl decals. These are limited edition. They're $10. I got these from artwork.org. This guy does some great work. Check this one out. How about that one, huh? I like this one. And then we've also got the UFO action here. So $10, pick one of these up. The shipping is absolutely free. And be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Enjoy the presentation.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, in your introduction, you touched on Planet 9 and the research by Caltech researchers Brown and Battigan. I think that's probably a good place to start. Before I go there, though, I'll just set the background. I'm an amateur astronomer. I've been interested in astronomy since I was a child. I'm nearly 50 years old, so that's about 40 years interest in astronomy. I'm on the committee of my local astronomical society observatory. I've been a member there for several years. We have a 14-inch telescope and a number of smaller telescopes that I have free access to. And I'm also involved in giving presentations at the Astronomy Society and hosting groups that come through the observatory. So now coming back to Planet 9, yes indeed, we are discovering new objects out there all the time, and you mentioned the exoplanets that have been discovered out there. The number is growing. We've got increased technology, space telescopes, improved detection, and certainly we are discovering new objects, and this is of course why, or one of the reasons why Pluto was demoted as a planet. Because if Pluto was still a planet, then we would have to add several more planets to our solar system because of the other objects, the dwarf planets that we've discovered since. So if Pluto would qualify as a planet, these other ones would as well. Now, Planet 9 is described by Brown and Battigan as, just kill my phone there, sorry, as having an orbital period of somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000, sorry, somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 years as an orbital period. So they're estimating that it would be somewhere around the region of 15,000 years as an orbital period. They've also stated that if their object exists, and it is still very much theoretical, that its orbit would come no closer than 200 AU to the Earth. Now, when we compare that to, say, Nibiru Planet X, well, the common claim that is made about Nibiru Planet X is that it has an orbital period of 3,600 years, and that it's passing right through our solar system. Well, obviously, there's a big difference between the orbital period of Planet 9, if it exists, and the distance, the closest distance of Planet 9, and the supposed closest distance of Nibiru Planet X. So I think it's fair to say that Planet 9 cannot be Nibiru Planet X. Now, if there was an object passing through our inner solar system, such as is claimed by the Nibiru Planet X believers, then it would be clearly visible to all of the amateur astronomers all around the world. We've got people showing us videos and photos all the time claiming to show Nibiru in the sky, taken on all sky cameras with a very wide field of view, weather webcams, even cell phone cameras from the International Space Station and all sorts of other cameras. So obviously, if they were visible on these sort of cameras, then it would be no problem for even amateur astronomers from all around the world to be imaging Nibiru Planet X.
Okay, so now I have heard of some reports that there are specific astronomers and amateurs alike that find this footage and then they bring it out on the internet. Now, there's been a few images that I've seen that I look at and I go, wow. But most of the stuff that I've seen, I would definitely say it's just some type of lens flare or anomaly. And then there's people out there that say, hey, you know, there's a Planet X, but you can't see it because it's this type of star that's in this infrared spectrum, etc. So there's so many different theories out there. And I appreciate everybody's theory. If somebody genuinely feels that it's legit and they come out and talk about that, like I said, hey, that's awesome. Now, if somebody's coming out and feeding off of people's fear financially and other means based on their, you know, something that they know is false, then hey, I'm not cool with that. But hey, there's a lot of people out there that do it. Look at people on TV that make millions of dollars doing that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's been around since the beginning of time. You've got these wolves in sheep's clothing all over the place. So what do you say to people that talk about Ferrata and others that were in Chile that say, hey, there's Planet X, it's real, and you can look at these biblical prophecies in China and all over the world that talk about these cataclysms that happen at specific times?
Well, the first thing I'd say to them is show me the right ascension and declination coordinates, because this is something that's always lacking from these people that insist that Nibiru Planet X is real. For any object that's out in space, it has right ascension and declination coordinates, sort of like GPS coordinates. So if this object is real and people are photographing it, instead of being lens flares or internal lens reflections and so forth, then it will also have right ascension and declination coordinates that any astronomer can use to point the telescopes at and image it. And so far, every time I've challenged anyone to provide the coordinates for Nibiru Planet X, they've either failed to provide the coordinates or they've actually provided the coordinates to other known objects such as CW Leonis or Reflection Nebula or other objects that are certainly not Nibiru Planet X. Now, it's all very well talking about ancient prophecies and things like that, and I have seen a number of people trying to justify Nibiru Planet X this way, but at the end of the day, if you still can't provide the coordinates and no one can actually image it, then you're still left with nothing.
Right, it's still going to... Now, even if you look at some of the older reports, I've found old news articles that say they discovered Planet X, and that was actually Pluto. And so it certainly has... It just seems like there's this mystique behind Planet X or Nibiru, even before Mr. Sitchin and others came out and talked about it. And I almost wonder if it has something to do with kind of our psychology, just kind of the way the human brain thinks. It's like if we have this thought of fear as example, like something we can't change. You know, I mean, if there's a giant planet that's going to come wipe out the Earth, there's really not a whole lot you and I can do about it. We could talk about it. We could try and build some type of technology that would offset the Earth or something like that, but it'd be very difficult to do. And, you know, people since the beginning of time, at least that it's been written about, have had this fear towards the end of the world or certain cataclysms. So I almost wonder if there's like this psychological thing that's kind of linked to Planet X as well. What do you think about that?
I think that is a large part of it. People enjoy a roller coaster ride, or they like going to watch a horror movie. There's that whole thing with adrenaline and so on. And I think that this is a lot of it. People, in a sense, people like to be scared. They get a bit of a thrill out of it. And I think this is why the videos claiming sensational things get the hits, whereas plain old debunking videos like mine, of course, will never get the number of hits that the videos actually making the claims do. And just to go back to what you're saying about, you know, they thought that they had discovered Planet X. You mentioned that it turned out to be Pluto. If you're referring back to 1983, people often talk about the news that was out in 1983 claiming that Planet X had been detected back then. I'm
actually going back to like the 30s, going way back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. So, yes, that was about when Pluto was discovered, about 1930, 31, if I remember correctly. Pluto was actually discovered by checking between photographic plates that were taken on different nights, flicking backwards and forwards to detect if there were any objects that were moving. That's using what's called a blink comparator. And, of course, once they discovered Pluto and they checked back, they actually discovered that Pluto had been imaged previously but not detected. But going forward to 1983, there was a big news item that's often quoted where they claimed that they had discovered, or thought that they had discovered, a large planetary body further out in the solar system. This is often quoted, and it turned out that it was, in fact, a background galaxy, what they refer to as a ULIRG, ULIRG, which stands for ultra-luminous infrared galaxy. So this was fairly new with the technology that they were using at the time, doing this infrared sky survey, and they found the signature of something that they hadn't seen before, and they thought, well, what could this be? And of course, one of the theories was that it might be this large planet, which got dubbed Planet X. But as I say, it did actually turn out to be and confirmed as a background galaxy. It was the infrared signature of that galaxy.
And there's a lot of talk about how most solar systems are either binary star systems or trinary star systems. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. But of course, it doesn't mean that they all are. People jump to the conclusion that, you know, if the majority, and to be honest, I can't remember what the percentage is, but they jump to the conclusion that therefore our sun must be a binary as well. Well, we know that the nearest star to our sun is 4.25 light years away, and it's not a binary. It is in fact part of a triple star system. This is the Alpha Centauri star system, but we're not part of that star system. So as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence to support the idea that we are part of a binary star system, certainly not from an astronomer's point of view. And I would imagine that if we were part of a binary star system, that our binary twin would be a lot closer than the nearest star.
Do you remember back in 2011, I read an article, I can even pull it up, I'll find it if I need to. I'm sure you've seen this, and it had a picture of Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, the two suns, and it said in the news article that in a couple years, you're going to see what looks like a second sun because Betelgeuse exploded.
Well, of course, we wouldn't know that Betelgeuse had exploded until we saw that it exploded because of the speed of light. So we're not going to know until the light from Betelgeuse actually arrives. And then, of course, and I can't tell you off the top of my head how many light years away Betelgeuse is.
I'm going to pull that article up while you're talking. I just want you to take a look at it because it was very interesting when I saw that. And it was a mainstream news article, too. It wasn't like something on a conspiracy forum that has like 30 subscribers or something. So let me just find that.
Right. So, and if we saw the light coming in from a nova or supernova of Betelgeuse, then that would mean that, of course, that the event actually happened, however many light years away in time that Betelgeuse is.
Okay, I found it. It's right here. And, I am very agnostic with the news, especially. I think the news does this wag the dog scenario a lot where they'll come up with certain articles to see what kind of reaction they can get with people. But here it is. And there it is. So I was pretty close on my description of it. Earth to get second sun as supernova turns night into day. And it's got a picture of Luke Skywalker there in the second sun. It says, at least for a week or two, the Earth could have a second sun. You see that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely. If Betelgeuse went supernova, then it would be bright like that during the daytime. And the star that exploded, was it about 1066? I can't remember the time. It resulted in what's now known to be the Crab Nebula.
Okay.
I believe that was actually visible during the daytime as well.
Huh. Yeah, that's, and I think a lot of people, even me included, when I saw this article several years ago, it made me question it. And I thought to myself, well, are they doing this as a preconditioning thing for the possibility of a return of a binary sun? But this is definitely something that could happen then, just based upon that. That would be a legit thing.
That's right. And I mean, if we're detecting supernovas and distant stars, they do happen not too irregularly, but Betelgeuse is a very big bright star. So, right. And by the way, it's 600 light years away. I'll just check that. It's 642 light years away. So if it exploded, if we saw that it had exploded, that would mean that it happened 642 years ago.
Gotcha. Now, another thing, too, that fascinates me is you're an astronomer. You have a pretty good observatory where you're at. You said it's like a 14-inch telescope, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So what does that give you access to that we don't have access to, essentially?
Nothing really.
Anybody
can go out and purchase quite a good-sized telescope. It really just comes down to your budget. And also, the other thing that people often say in the Nibiru Planet X circles is that, amateur astronomers can't see Nibiru Planet X because it has to be imaged in infrared. Well, we're not restricted to that either. Anybody can go out and buy a dedicated infrared camera for their telescope, or you could also use a modified camera that sees into the hydrogen alpha wavelengths. We use a Canon 60D-A. The A stands for astrophotography because it does not have the infrared cut filter in the camera. So we're actually seeing into that hydrogen alpha infrared wave band that most cameras actually exclude with the infrared cut filters. Astronomy Live, for example, he has a dedicated infrared camera. It's not just simply a modified camera, it's actually the real deal, which he can use on his, I believe he's got an 8-inch telescope. So yes, anybody can go out and buy quite a good telescope. It's not restricted to a special circle of people that have special privileges or knowledge or anything like that. And the irony is that these same people that say that Nibiru Planet X can only be imaged with special infrared cameras, in the next breath will be showing you videos and photos of Nibiru Planet X supposedly imaged on a cell phone camera or a web camera or whatever.
That's a good point, man. I like that. That's very interesting because, well, here's the thing. Just as with many topics of amazement, and hey, I'm certainly neutral to this. There could be something out there that we haven't found yet. I'm not saying that there isn't, but the way that you just brought that up, that makes a good point. 1 second if somebody says, hey, you can't see it unless it's infrared, and then the next second they see a picture that looks legit to them, but it was taken off of a cell phone camera, a Samsung Galaxy or something, they're kind of fitting what they want to their story.
That's right, yeah. Now I'm going to share my screen with you, and we'll take a look at some images from the all-sky cameras that are doing the rounds at the moment.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this is an image from the Cades Observatory in Australia. And we're seeing a number of these sort of images doing the rounds and videos lately. I actually saved a lot of these back in January. I was intending to do a follow-up video back then as a result of videos that Jeff P was uploading. Now, normally when we see these images, we only see about 6 of the images at a time because that's the number of images that will display at any one time on the all-sky camera website. But I'm using a piece of software here. Hopefully you can see that. It's called Sequence Download by Nursoft. And it's set up to automatically download the images from these various all-sky web cameras. and other weather webcams that are around the world. So if we go back to the images here, you can see that this object here that people are pointing to as being Nibiru, Planet X, or the red Kachina is in the sky. You can see that clearly?
I can see the red dot, yeah.
Okay, so there it is. They say that that's Nibiru, Planet X, and we see it crossing the sky as the sun is traveling across the sky in the opposite direction. Okay, so we've got the sun is moving from east to west across the sky, and Nibiru Planet X, or supposedly Nibiru Planet X, is traveling in the opposite direction from west to east. Well, this already creates a problem, because what is the reason that we see the sun crossing from east to west?
Well, because it's a mirror effect, right?
Oh, it's because of the Earth rotating on its axis once every 24 hours. So this gives the illusion that the sun is actually orbiting around the Earth. Of course, we orbit around the sun, but the sun crosses the sky as the Earth is rotating on its axis once every 24 hours. So this is
but
why
the Earth is flat, man. Come on, everybody told me on the internet.
Yeah. So this is why the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets and everything else that's out in space and in the sky crosses our sky from east to west. So it rises in the east, it crosses over, and sets in the west. Now the exceptions are things that are in low Earth orbit, such as the International Space Station and satellites that are a little further up because they're in Earth orbit. So they can actually cross the sky in the opposite direction because they are very close in orbiting the Earth. So the problem that we have here is that our Nibiru Planet X red Kachina down here is actually traveling across the sky in the opposite direction to the sun. Now, if it was out in space, like the planets, it would actually be traveling from east to west, just like the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets do due to the rotation of the Earth. So that's the first problem that we have with these images. Now, I mentioned that when we look at these all-sky images, we only see about 6 images at a time, and usually the YouTube channels that are uploading these images just home in on those 6 images, and it only tells a little part of the story. Some of the channels will even just show one single image, but most of them will show the 6 images sort of cycling through. But what happens if we keep going? This is the beauty of this downloader that I'm using, because it automatically saves the images every few minutes. So I can have a whole 24-hour sequence or 7-day sequence. So as we keep going across, we can see our Nibiru Planet X is heading further towards the east. It's getting towards the horizon. It's about to set. But if we keep on going, we find it's actually in front of the trees now. And if we keep on going further, we find that our Nibiru Planet X is now inside the camera dome. If I go right back to where we started and head back in the other direction, so we're going back in time, now we can see that our Nibiru Planet X is again in front of the trees and again is inside the camera housing. So this completely debunks this notion from these all-sky cameras that this object here that we're seeing is Nibiru Planet X or the red Kachina or anything other than a lens flare.
You know, I'm glad you're bringing this to our attention, because I get thousands of images every single week of what people think is Planet X or Nibiru or Wormwood or Nemesis or the red Kachina, like you say, and a lot of them look very similar to this. And it's really, I know people that literally spend hours, David, hours a day just eyeing and gooing over this picture or these types of pictures, and their intentions are great. They have genuine intentions, man, but it's like they're literally spending a quarter of the day absorbing this stuff, and it messes with your psyche. It messes with your wow. Yeah, I'm really glad you're bringing this to our attention, because you can tell without a shadow of a doubt that the red Kachina is bouncing on the inside of the housing there on that camera. So that's an intergalactic right there, shape-shifting.
Now, just while I've got this image up too, I'll just point out this vertical line that we see, which follows the sun across the sky. Okay. Now, this is called CCD bleeding or CCD blooming, depending which school you went to, and it's a result of the pixels on the image sensor actually overloading with charge. And if you imagine that the image sensor is like a series of buckets which collect the light or the photons hitting the image sensor generate these electrons, okay? And if the light source is too bright, then the the pixels or the buckets of charge will actually overflow. And they will overflow down the columns of pixels, just as you see here. Now, this particular image is really good because we can see that the image is not cropped to just the area of sky that we can see. We can also see inside the camera housing. And we can see that this vertical line extends beyond the horizon down inside the camera housing. So that confirms that it is just a product of the image sensor itself. And some of the stereo and SOHO images that we see, we also see these strange objects next to the sun. And some of them appear to have wings on them and things like this, and people say, well, this is the winged planet. And all it is that you've got a bright object such as Venus or Jupiter overloading the image sensor, and the charge is actually spilling over into the neighboring columns and rows, and you get these lines. Now, the thing that you'll always notice about those images is that these lines are always perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal, depending on the orientation of the image sensor. They're never at a 45-degree or odd angle. They're always straight up and down or horizontal.
And do you have other images as well that you can share with us besides the skycams that look like, to the novice, hey, that's a planetary body. That's a gigantic sun right next to our other sun?
Yes, indeed. And on my Facebook page, I've got a series of albums of images, and these ones have been doing the rounds again lately.
Send our audience to your Facebook page real quick.
Yeah, this is to Dave Gregg on Facebook. In fact, if you go to my YouTube channel and click on the About page, you'll find links to my Facebook pages in there anyway. So let's have a look at some of these black dot images. Now, people are using these and saying that these actually show Nibiru Planet X next to the sun. Now, what this is, again, is the image sensor in the camera is actually overloading. Now, there are two main types of image sensor. You've got the CCD, which stands for Charged Coupled Device, and you've got the CMOS sensor. Now, these black dot images will only occur in the CMOS type cameras. So if you're comparing two different cameras and wondering why you're seeing it in one and not in the other, it's because they're actually two different types of image sensor. So what we're seeing here, the black dot is in fact the sun. Okay, most of what we see when we look at the sun is actually glare, because the sun is so incredibly bright, and that bright sunlight is being refracted through the atmosphere. If we were out in space looking at the sun, we wouldn't see all of this glare because there would be no atmosphere to refract the light. So this black dot is in fact the actual disk of the sun. And now, if you go out to the hardware or engineering supply store and buy a replacement welding lens, a number 12 or darker, and use that to have a look at the sun, you'll actually be surprised at how tiny the sun's disk is compared to all of that glare. So look at some of these other images.
I'm glad you brought up if I can just jump in real quick, you brought up the
Sure.
welding glasses, and I've seen a lot of video footage where people will be recording through a welding glass, and you'll see what looks like another orb or another sun next to the sun. And I think it's probably just some type of reflection or something. I don't know. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, and I'll come back to that. That's there are lens flares, and there are also internal lens reflections. So I'll come back to that in just a moment. So here is a reflection of the sun in a window on that one. This one here, I'm not sure if this is a projector on the table. Obviously a bright light source. Maybe it's a reflected light source, but again we've got a black dot there. This one here is quite good with the security mirror. We've got a person taking this photograph, and the flash has gone off. We've got the black dot. We've also got a black dot with the real sun up there. And this one is a spotlight at a concert. And I'll just show you a couple more. This one is quite interesting because you've got all of these street lights, and they've all got a black dot on them. So all of these images were taken with the CMOS type image sensor in the camera, producing these black dots. So that's all that is. I mean, it looks like there's a huge object next to the sun, but the black dot is in fact the sun. Gotcha.
Yeah. Now that's I'm glad you brought those other light sources as well to kind of show that. That'll give people a better reference point.
Right.
Now this is your YouTube channel.
This is my YouTube channel, Dazza the Camera Man, and I've also got a page on Facebook called Voices of Reason to Explain X, or Vortex. and there's a link to Vortex in the description area of each one of my videos. I also do have a Dazza the Camera Man Facebook page as well, but Vortex is my main discussion page. Okay, so if I just go back to here to pick up, and then I can say that people can click on this video and check it out.
Yeah,
how's that?
Thanks.
Okay. So here's my playlist of videos dealing with Nibiru, lens flares, etc. And I've got a number of videos here, including this video here by BBQ Stew. There's another one here by Dan Deer Jump 94, which demonstrates the same thing. And this is what's known as the finger test. And with the normal sort of lens flares, the lens flare, when you move the camera around, the lens flare will move all around the frame of the image. So it's obviously not a real object. But with the internal lens reflections, the apparent object will remain static next to the sun. So it gives us the impression that it is, in fact, a real object next to the sun. But by doing the finger test, as demonstrated in these two excellent videos, what you do is you hold your finger out at arm's length, and you bring your finger across in front of the sun so that you're blocking out the sunlight. Now, when that happens, you always find that the apparent object next to the sun that you can see in your camera display will suddenly disappear. And the second part of the test is actually to bring your finger across in front of the apparent Nibiru Planet X object, and you will find that object then becomes superimposed on your finger, which obviously is impossible if it was a real object. So that's a very simple test that people can do. This has to be done outside, because if you're filming through windows, particularly double glazing, you will also get this bounce back effect between the layers of glass, which actually causes this. What's actually happening is that you're getting bounce back of light between the layers of glass and the lens, and so you're getting a secondary reflection of the real sun, which creates the illusion of a secondary object next to the sun. Rex?
Okay, and if you were to see something out there that sparked your interest, would you believe if you saw it, or are you to the point now to where you're absolutely convinced there's no way it could be real?
There's absolutely nothing out there. If there was an object such as Nibiru Planet X within our solar system, astronomers, both professional and amateur, all around the world would be all over it. We would all be imaging it. We would be sharing the coordinates, discussing it. It would be absolutely impossible to keep a lid on it. I hear these stories about dead astronomers and all of that. That's just utter nonsense. It would be impossible to keep the lid on something like that. Every night there are thousands of astronomers all around the world scanning the skies, looking for new asteroids or comets that they can credit with their own name as having discovered it. And these objects are tiny by comparison to what Nibiru Planet X is supposed to be. They say that Nibiru is supposed to be about 4 times the size of Jupiter. And these amateur astronomers are discovering tiny little asteroids and comets that are only 2 to 4 kilometers across. We remember when Comet Alanin was coming in, and then later Comet Ison. And these were both tiny comets, just a few kilometers across with the nucleus. And they were discovered, if I remember correctly, I think they were about 10 months out to their closest approach to the sun when they were discovered. So we had to wait that long. So you can imagine that an object that was 4 times the size of Jupiter would be discovered a lot sooner, and it would be very visible. And I should make the point too that the reason that we can see the planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn with our naked eyes is because they reflect sunlight. And people say, well, you can only image brown dwarfs in infrared. Well, that's only true for one very good reason, and that is because the nearest brown dwarfs are so very far away from our sun that they can't possibly reflect enough visible light. The nearest brown dwarf to our sun is 6.5 light years away, which is approximately 2 light years further away than our nearest star. But if there was a brown dwarf within our solar system, it would reflect visible light just like any other planet or moon or comet or asteroid does. I've imaged Pluto through a 14-inch telescope just using ordinary optical visible light. I didn't have to use infrared to do that. And you can be sure that if Nibiru Planet X was within our solar system, it would be just as visible as the other naked eye planets such as Jupiter or Saturn or Mars or any of them.
And that was kind of what I meant when I asked you about the telescope that you have, the 14-inch telescope. I didn't mean like, do you have some special, Black Ops telescope or something like that? Just more so, what does that telescope give you access to? Because most of the people that I know don't have a telescope of that caliber. So you're saying you can pick up every planet in the solar system with your 14-inch telescope?
That's right, yes.
Okay, and you don't have to, I mean, the orbits are pretty well understood and explained, etc. But even if there was a planet with a very odd orbit, if you could latch onto it at one point, then hypothetically speaking, you should be able to at any point.
That's right, and this is how the trajectories are calculated from observations. It only takes a few observations of an object so that the math brainiacs can actually calculate the orbit. I mean, that's beyond my abilities. But I was talking at the start about the right ascension and declination coordinates for objects, and this is how they're actually calculated from just a few observations. Astronomy Live is actually very good at doing this. He can actually take observations of objects through his own telescope, do the calculations himself, and provide the accurate right ascension and declination coordinates for that object for future observations. And this is what I was saying before, is that if Nibiru Planet X were real and it was really being imaged by people on these webcams and so on, then it should be no problem for anyone with the right skills or right software to actually be able to plot the trajectory of that object and provide the right ascension and declination coordinates for anybody to point a telescope at and observe that object at any point in time. Astronomy Live has actually done these calculations based on some of these webcam images and found that Planet X Nibiru in these images would actually have to have an orbit that took it within the surface of the Earth. In other words, it would actually impact the Earth on each orbit, which obviously hasn't happened. So it just confirms that we're looking at lens flares.
Could we jump back to Planet 9 for a minute and talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Now, I am very novice when it comes to the distance, the astronomical units, etc. And you described pretty good about that earlier with Planet 9 and how it couldn't be Nibiru because the orbit of Nibiru being 3,600 years, etc. But first of all, do you believe in Planet 9? And if so, what does that mean that it's 15 or 20 AU units away or whatever? I think I've said that wrong too. I'm sorry if I did.
Yeah, that's okay. Certainly Planet 9 could exist. It's still very much hypothetical, but there is some pretty solid research to support its existence. So I certainly wouldn't dismiss the possibility that it's real. And just to clarify, the orbital period, so the period that it would take to make one orbit, they have estimated at being between, as I recall, 10,000 and 20,000 years. So somewhere in the middle, we're talking about 15,000 years. Which is rather different to Nibiru Planet X at 3,600 years. But the other figure that you were referring to was the closest approach, which Brown and Battergen have estimated at being 200 AU. So just to explain what we're talking about there, 1 AU, or 1 astronomical unit, is the average distance between the Sun and the Earth, which is approximately 93 million miles, or 150 million kilometers. So at 200 AU, we're talking about 200 times the distance between the Sun and the Earth. If you actually work that out in distance, it's I think I worked it out to be 30 billion kilometers. So it's not coming anywhere near the Earth. And remember that they estimated that as being its closest approach. It could, if it exists on its, say, 15,000 year orbit, that would be the closest it would ever come to us, is 200 AU. So it could be a lot further away than 200 AU at any given time.
Let me jump in then. If it's that far away, how could it be affecting the Sun and the planets in our solar system the way that it's described in some of these news articles that are coming out from some very prestigious universities such as Caltech?
Yeah, the maths involved is beyond my abilities. You probably need to talk to Astronomy Live for his views on that. The advanced maths involved is way beyond my abilities. But we talk about the planets in our solar system, how they orbit around the Sun, as if the Sun is at the dead center of our solar system. But in fact, that's not actually the case. Even the Sun does a little orbit of its own because of the offset of the gravity of the planets in our solar system. So if you imagine swinging a a large weight around your head, or a bucket of water or something like that, you know that you're not going to pivot around perfectly on one spot. You're actually going to do a little bit of a wobble to compensate for the weight and the mass of the weight that you're spinning around. And it's actually the same with the sun as the planets orbit and actually tug on the sun. It does a little wobble as well. So yes, the other bodies in the solar system do affect the sun.
Let me ask your opinion on chemtrails, if I can. I know that's different than Nibiru and Planet X and such, but what is your take on all of the geoengineering that's going on? Because a lot of people think they're doing that to hide certain things, cloak certain things. I think it just has more to do with weather modification personally, but what's your take on that?
Well, first of all I see are contrails. I don't see chemtrails as they claim to be.
Because I certainly have seen both. You know, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt real quick. I just want to say one thing real quick. I remember one time I was in Colorado Springs with a couple coworkers of mine. This is back in 2013, and the spraying in the atmosphere was so intense that I had these polarized sunglasses on, and you could see all the particulates falling down from the skies. And you know, you definitely know when they've got certain commercial jets and other jets that have certain routes that they need to take, and the contrails dissipate at a certain pace and such. But even Weather Channel has came out and said that there is geoengineering, weather modification going on. The Olympics in China, they used weather modification. In Salt Lake City, Utah, they used weather modification and places for skiing areas and stuff like that. The spraying. So you don't get any of that in New Zealand?
Oh, certainly weather modification exists. I remember my father telling me about cloud seeding when I was just a young boy. So we're talking about, again, about 40 years ago. There is weather modification on a small localized scale, such as cloud seeding. Sometimes they've used explosives that they fire up on rockets to explode, and I think you mentioned the Olympics, to sort of clear up the smog and so on. Certainly that goes on, but that's rather different to a global conspiracy of spraying poisonous chemicals across the earth. And it's interesting that even within the chemtrail community, the people that believe in chemtrails often can't even agree on the reasons why. I mean, you've linked it here to maybe using chemtrails to block out the visibility of Nibiru Planet X if it were real. Well, if that's the case, then they're doing actually a pretty lousy job of hiding the sky from most of the astronomers around the world, because although your sky might be clouded out with cloud, or what you might think are chemtrails, the sky in the state next to you, or my sky on the other side of the planet, might be nice and clear. And there are some excellent astrophotography pages on Facebook and other forums on the internet where you can go and see fantastic images of the night sky, or even the daytime sky, free of clouds and so on. I've done some astrophotography. You can see the images on my Facebook page. We can see deep sky, even nebulae, and so on. But again, going back to my point, is that often these people can't agree. Some people say that they're chemtrailing the skies to block out our view of Nibiru Planet X. Some people say it's for weather modification to prevent global warming. Some people say it is because of population control. They're trying to poison us all and reduce the population because of the resources that we're using. There are all sorts of reasons that people give. But at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, all I'm seeing is contrails, which are the natural result of an engine that's pumping out warm, moist air into a freezing cold atmosphere, and that warm, moist air is freezing into ice crystals, and that's what we see. We're seeing artificial clouds.
It must be a lot different in New Zealand, and you're very lucky for that, because I do see the weather modification. When I say chemtrails, I guess it really comes down to what your definition is of chemtrails, because one person, like you said, their definition of chemtrails might be this global conspiracy to hide Nibiru. Some people might say it's for depopulation. I find it interesting. Here would be my rebuttal on it blocking out certain planetary bodies. If it can block out those planetary bodies, then why isn't Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune and Mars and all the other planets and the moon? How come you can still see those, but you can't see the other ones. I mean, there's a lot of holes in that armor for me. But certainly, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, I see on a weekly basis, you can see what they'll do is they'll have these certain checkerboard patterns, or they'll do these X's as far as the chemicals that are being sprayed in the atmosphere, and it'll be a blue sky day. Once these patterns are sprayed into the atmosphere, then they will dissipate, and shortly after you'll see it'll be cloudy, it'll be hazy, and it's not the typical clouds that you see naturally. So, but I'm in Texas, and I have no idea what it's like in New Zealand. I would certainly love to be out there. I mean, talk about a wilderness mecca, just a beautiful part of the world. I think that New Zealand is, man, it's probably smaller than the state of Texas even, isn't it? There's not, how many people live in New Zealand?
I think we've got about 4.5 million people here in New Zealand, if I remember correctly, latest count. I hear what you're saying about the clouds, and indeed, after the September 11 attacks and all the aircraft were grounded, the skies cleared up for a couple of days because you didn't have all of these aircraft traveling from all of these different locations around the United States, crossing the sky, and if you consider how many airports and destinations there are, these flight paths are going to crisscross just like roads crisscross. Okay, so these flight paths are basically highways in the sky, and their flight paths are going to intersect, and you are going to see grid patterns because that's the natural result of lots of aircraft traveling from lots of beginning airports to their destinations. They're going to intersect each other, and then you've also got the problem of the drift, because the air doesn't just remain static in one place. It's going to drift depending on what the air currents are going to do. So I've seen some images of it looks like multiple tracks in the sky, but all of that is because you've got aircraft on approach to an airport, and as the aircraft approach, they leave their contrails behind them. And then the air current is moving. You might have, say, that the air is moving from east to west. So as each aircraft travels through, then the trail that it leaves is also going to be shifted through the air, and then the next aircraft will come along, lay a fresh trail, and so on. So you're actually going to get a series of these trails moving across the sky. And yes, they will spread out, and they will cloud out the sky, because that is actually what they are. They are artificial clouds. They are the moisture from the jet engines freezing as ice crystals in the sky, and that is exactly what clouds are. So as far as chemicals are concerned, there is one main chemical in these contrails, and that would be that evil chemical called dihydrogen monoxide, otherwise known as water.
I'll tell you, there is actually, I've seen so many different scientific reports where people have actually had these. Now, this is where it can get kind of, the atmosphere, there's so much stuff in the atmosphere already from industries and different pollutants that are out there. But there's a lot of people that say, hey, man, we have actually gone out when they've done heavy contrailing, or whatever name you want to call it, and they have collected certain samples. They've sent them in. I've seen the reports, and you're talking barium and strom and all sorts of other stuff that just shouldn't be in gas that I know of. But hey, maybe they're changing up. Maybe they're getting more speed and better fuel economy by putting that stuff in there. I mean, it's pretty fascinating indeed, the times we live in. Now, let me ask you this, David, and I really appreciate you coming on here with us, and it's nice to get an alternative to doom and gloom and conspiracy. I love a good conspiracy. I do, don't get me wrong, but I also appreciate and cherish the truth more. So I think that oftentimes the truth is somewhere in the middle between two extremes.
I've just pulled something up. We're talking about the chemicals. You're talking about barium and strontium and so on. Do you enjoy a good fireworks display?
Yeah, I do. And I know some of that stuff's in fireworks, right?
Yeah, so I just pulled that up. What people often don't realize when they're out at these fireworks displays looking up at the sky, watching all of these lovely colors raining down on them from above, is that the colors in the fireworks are actually produced by burning barium and aluminium and strontium and all of these chemicals that people tell us are in chemtrails. And as far as taking samples of supposedly of chemtrails, usually we find that the samples taken are contaminated because they've been taken from the ground, which could be contaminated from all sorts of things, including industry. Aluminium is actually one of the, or if not the most common natural element in nature. So, it's no surprise that you're going to find these chemicals in the environment. But what people fail to do, of course, is that they're not following behind an aircraft that they believe is laying down a chemtrail and taking a direct sample from that trail and having that analysed. They're using other means to come up with their samples.
So, I mean, you pretty much feel that... Okay. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I respect that. Well, let me ask you this, David, if I can, before I close out tonight with you. Are there a couple other things that you feel you could share with us that maybe somebody that, is just still convinced that Nibiru is real, the 3,600-year orbit is real, there's going to be a pole shift here in September 23rd, 2017 or 2021 or 2134 or 2768?
2003 or 1983 or...
Have you heard me before say, and I'm not trying to be rude, because I have a lot of very good friends that really truly believe in Nibiru, and hey, God bless them, man. That's awesome. I respect them for that. So, and hey, maybe there's something there. I have always been very skeptical about the return of Planet X causing a pole shift and mass chaos. I don't know why. I mean, but that's kind of where my gut is. But at the same time, I appreciate information, and there's a lot of people that want to know this kind of stuff. So I do my best to get guests from a wide spectrum. I mean, I talk to a whole bunch of people that do and don't believe in Planet X. So, kind of like if you watch the Discovery Channel or if you watch the History Channel or the Sci-Fi Channel, do you like every single show on that channel? And do you turn on a newscast and agree with every single thing that person says all the time? No, I don't think so. Do you, David?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, even with astronomy, there are some claims that are sometimes made that I have difficulty accepting, and I'll sit on the fence about. I'm not talking about things like the existence of Nibiru Planet X. I'm talking about theories about how the universe came into being and so on. But then I'm not an astrophysicist, and I mentioned before that I don't have the mathematical abilities to do the sort of calculations that others such as Astronomy Live are very capable of doing. So in that regard, I'm probably out of my depth anyway. But there are minds that are far brighter than me, who have much better understanding of astrophysics, who can understand these sort of things. But in that regard, I'm sort of out of my depth. In regard to the question about people wondering if Planet X is going to arrive next week, next month, next year sort of thing, these are the claims that have been made for years. Nancy Leader from Zeta Talk announced that Planet X was going to arrive in 2003, and she advised her followers that they should euthanize their pets, and she actually killed 2 of her puppies. And of course, Nibiru Planet X didn't arrive in 2003, and here we are 13 years later. And then there were all sorts of claims made about December 21, 2012, and things that were supposed to happen, and that we were supposed to go through the galactic plane and basically all be fried with gamma radiation and all this sort of nonsense. And of course, that never happened, and the world didn't end as we know it. And I keep seeing new dates for the arrival of Nibiru Planet X, and of course, those dates keep coming and going. And certainly if it was within the solar system, as I mentioned, it would be clearly visible, just as all of the other planets are. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to that one question: is show me the right ascension and declination coordinates. Because if it's real, then you should be able to provide those coordinates, and then we can all turn our telescopes at it and we can all image it, and it would be the end of the debate. Occam's razor. The simplest solution is probably it. Yeah. Well, this has been great, David. Much appreciated. I'd strongly recommend, if you guys want to know more about David and the work that he does, check out Dazza the Camera Man on YouTube. He's also on Facebook. And it's great to have you on the show, David. Maybe we can get you on again sometime. Yeah, thank you, Rex. I've enjoyed it, and it's been a pleasure. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Rex Bear, Leak Project. How the heck are you? First off, I just want to say before we get started, I am neutral on the subject of Planet X. I do feel there is enough evidence out there to offer a strong debate there are other planets outside the Kuiper belt. Several articles from multiple sources, including NASA, even states they have discovered well over 1,000 planets, and this is growing almost daily. We even have astronomers from Caltech and other prestigious universities describing Earth changes, solar changes caused by a giant planetary body on the outskirts of our solar system. So certainly that is a possibility. And with that said, I'm neutral and even somewhat skeptical about many claims discussed in regards to Nibiru and the Nemesis. Doesn't mean I don't believe, or I do, and it doesn't matter either way. This information is for the audience to decide and take with you what resonates. You can take that to the bank. I will not disrespect anyone or call someone a liar, and feel most people do have genuine intentions at heart. I also have my opinions and things that I'm passionate about, and ask that anyone that watches this podcast keep the name calling, the insults of others, keep it to yourself, please. Constructive criticism is healthy, it's strong, it's encouraged. However, insults and personal attacks will not be tolerated because they offer nothing of substance or benefit. There are people out there in the world today behind the scenes that are far more deceiving and conniving than most YouTubers, in my opinion. Now, if that said, I do not like to be tricked or fooled, and you shouldn't either. The truth is out there. The Leak Project was created to offer news and awareness not found in the mainstream news. More importantly, to find the truth and bring it to you. If someone comes out with a video or a photograph and they truly feel what they're looking at is genuine, later to find out it's not real, but some other explainable anomaly, that doesn't make them a liar or trickster. I give serious props and have great respect for those willing to put themselves on the line by offering time, commitment to show or search for such evidence. It takes a lot of guts, and I've spent years being ostracized because of my own research that I've done on similar topics. Key is learning from our mistakes, not getting into the nonsense, getting lost in the nonsense. Listen, have an open mind, yet not so open it allows an entire armada of speculation, falsities to blanket the truth. Whether you believe in Planet X Nibiru or not, after this presentation with David, you will have a better understanding of astronomy and our solar system. This is Rex Bear. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Become a contributing member at leakproject.com, and you'll get access to exclusive content only available for contributing members. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Also, I want to make sure you guys know about these really cool, let me show this to you real quick. This is my shameless plug. We've got these new high-quality vinyl decals. These are limited edition. They're $10. I got these from artwork.org. This guy does some great work. Check this one out. How about that one, huh? I like this one. And then we've also got the UFO action here. So $10, pick one of these up. The shipping is absolutely free. And be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Enjoy the presentation.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, in your introduction, you touched on Planet 9 and the research by Caltech researchers Brown and Badigan. I think that's probably a good place to start. Before I go there, though, I'll just set the background. I'm an amateur astronomer. I've been interested in astronomy since I was a child. I'm nearly 50 years old, so that's about 40 years interest in astronomy. I'm on the committee of my local astronomical society observatory. I've been a member there for several years. We have a 14-inch telescope and a number of smaller telescopes that I have free access to. And I'm also involved in giving presentations at the Astronomy Society and hosting groups that come through the observatory. So now coming back to Planet 9, yes indeed, we are discovering new objects out there all the time, and you mentioned the exoplanets that have been discovered out there. The number is growing. We've got increased technology, space telescopes, improved detection, and certainly we are discovering new objects, and this is of course why, or one of the reasons why Pluto was demoted as a planet. Because if Pluto was still a planet, then we would have to add several more planets to our solar system because of the other objects, the dwarf planets that we've discovered since. So if Pluto would qualify as a planet, these other ones would as well. Now, Planet 9 is described by Brown and Battigan as, let me just kill my phone there, sorry, as having an orbital period of somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000, somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 years as an orbital period. So they're estimating that it would be somewhere around the region of 15,000 years as an orbital period. They've also stated that if their object exists, and it is still very much theoretical, that its orbit would come no closer than 200 AU to the Earth. Now, when we compare that to, say, Nibiru Planet X, well, the common claim that is made about Nibiru Planet X is that it has an orbital period of 3,600 years and that it's passing right through our solar system. Well, obviously, there's a big difference between the orbital period of Planet 9, if it exists, and the distance, the closest distance of Planet 9, and the supposed closest distance of Nibiru Planet X. So I think it's fair to say that Planet 9 cannot be Nibiru Planet X. Now, if there was an object passing through our inner solar system, such as is claimed by the Nibiru Planet X believers, then it would be clearly visible to all of the amateur astronomers all around the world. We've got people showing us videos and photos all the time claiming to show Nibiru in the sky, taken on all-sky cameras with a very wide field of view, weather webcams, even cell phone cameras from the International Space Station and all sorts of other cameras. So obviously, if they were visible on these sort of cameras, then it would be no problem for even amateur astronomers from all around the world to be imaging Nibiru Planet X.
Okay, so now I have heard of some reports that there are specific astronomers and amateurs alike that find this footage and then they bring it out on the internet. Now, there's been a few images that I've seen that I look at and I go, wow. But most of the stuff that I've seen, I would definitely say it's just some type of lens flare or anomaly. And then there's people out there that say, hey, you know, there's a Planet X, but you can't see it because it's this type of star that's in this infrared spectrum, etc. So there's so many different theories out there. And I appreciate everybody's theory. If somebody genuinely feels that it's legit and they come out and talk about that, like I said, hey, that's awesome. Now, if somebody's coming out and feeding